What is going on, Chess YouTube? So it is round number 5 of the 2025 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. Gukesh D just faced off against the Indian grandmaster Leon Mendoca. This was a killer game. Let's dive right in. All right, in the game, Gukesh opens 1e4, best by test. Then we have e5 from black. Then knight f3, knight c6, and finally bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez opening, one of the oldest and most important openings in all of chess. Now here, most black players do go knight f6, the Berlin defense these days, but instead here, Mendoca goes a6, driving back that bishop, the Morphy's defense. Now we have bishop a4, knight f6, attacking the pawn on e4, short castles, and here black goes for a very interesting line that Fabiano Caruana himself has popularized at the highest level. That is the Archangel with the move b5, bishop b3, and then bishop c5, getting this Italian-style bishop out on this very good diagonal right here. Now here, white has a million different ways to proceed here, a lot of different very challenging setups. Let's see what Gukesh has in mind for this game. All right, from here, Gukesh goes a4, gaining space on the queen side, threatening a takes b5, winning a pawn, as then that pawn on a6 would be pinned, as the rook on a8 would be hanging if you recapture on b5. Therefore, rook b8 is the standard move, defending that pawn and defending the rook. That way it's off that a file. Now here, Gukesh, normally white is going to go c3 here, intending a very fast d4. That is the absolute main line at the highest level. But instead, in this game, the move d3 was played. Now, this is a very quiet line that Magnus Carlsen himself has played quite a bit as white, and the idea is maybe you want to go bishop g5, maybe you want to go rook e1, knight d2, c3, and so on, and sort of slow play the game. Let's see what he has in mind. Here, black goes d6, a very standard move, defending that pawn on e5, and now allowing that knight on c6 to go somewhere else if it wants to. For example, d4, e7, and so on, and that pawn on e5 will not hang if that knight moves. Now here, Gukesh, he goes for the move bishop g5. Now this move is a little bit of a shocker. It's not exactly a strong move in this position. It's very well known from the Italian game that when white goes for a very fast bishop g5, black can go h6 and then g5, chasing back that bishop, and he will have a perfectly fine game, and he may even have attacking chances on the king side. But Gukesh here, above all else, he seems to want a very complicated middle game where he can try to outplay his lower rated opponent. Very interesting stuff. Here, black goes h6, driving back that bishop. And now here, bishop h4, sure enough, is the move, allowing black to go g5, driving back the bishop once again, and now bishop g3. Now here, black does castle, short castles on the board. Gukesh goes c3, and here black makes maybe the first mistake of the game from his perspective. Here, the right move is actually b4, gaining space on the queen side, threatening b takes c3, opening up the b file for the rook. That would be the right way forward. Now, instead, here, bishop b6 played in the game, and this move is quite a bit weaker than the alternatives. The problem with this move, the rook is no longer active on the b file. Ideas like b4 no longer make a whole lot of sense, and here white is going to slowly start to take over in this middle game. All right, Gukesh, knight a3. Very interesting move. Maybe intending putting pressure on b5, maybe intending knight c2 to e3. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Now here, Leon Mendoca finds a very strong move. That is just the maneuver knight to e7, intending knight g6, finding a better square for that pony. And of course, with that pawn on e5 being supported by the pawn on d6, the knight is able to move without losing that pawn on e5. Now here, Gukesh, he has the option of trading and winning that pawn on b5. And it turns out white can do that, but it is not a good idea at all in this position. And I do want to show you real fast why that is the case. Here, if white goes a takes, then knight takes b5. First of all, black's going to have the option of bishop takes f2 at any point, and after white takes back, then the knight on b5 will hang. But beyond that, the computer says you can just go knight g6 here, intending maybe knight h5, knight f4, and so on, and black's going to get a huge initiative on the king side for that missing pawn. pawn. That knight on b5 is very misplaced, and overall, black is going to be doing just fine, if not a little bit better. So with that in mind, on move 14, a takes b5 was not played. Instead, the move knight c2 played in the game, showing the other idea of that move knight to a3. Now that knight is heading over to the e3 square, where it is very well centralized. All right, now here black goes knight g6, transferring that knight over. And now here, Gukesh, sure enough, knight to e3 is the move. Again, finding the very good e3 square for the knight. But I do want to point out, for whatever reason, the computer says knight b4 on the prior move is actually a little bit better than knight e3. That one confuses me a little bit. If you know why knight b4 is the stronger move for white, I mean, comment down below and let me know why that is the case. I'm very, very curious about that one. All right, instead, knight to e3 played in the game. Now here black does trade on e3. We have bishop takes e3, and then f takes e3 is the move, recapturing towards the center and opening up the f file for the rook. Now look at this. White has a tremendous amount of pressure on this diagonal and on the f file, all piling up on f7. That may give white some good attacking chances, but the computer still seems to think black is doing a little bit better, as those knights will be very active on the king side. All right, now here, king g7 chosen in the game, getting the king off the back rank, maybe intending ideas like h5, h4, maybe rook g8 or h8 later in the game. And now here, Gukesh, with that in mind, he really should be thinking about getting some sort of initiative going on the queen side before it is too late. And of course, the best way to do that is just a takes b5, opening up the a file for the very important rook on a1. However, instead, Gukesh in the game, bishop c2 chosen, retreating his bishop. Maybe the idea is he wants to go b2 to b4, but that is not such a strong idea yet. And here black is going to have a lot of different ways to capitalize on that. The strongest one being just b takes a4, opening up the b file and threatening rook takes b2. Now, unfortunately for us, in the game, Leon Mendoca, he does not go for that line. Instead, the move c5 chosen in the game, gaining space on the queen side in the spirit of the Shigoran variation of the Ruy Lopez opening. Now here, Gukesh, he does open up that a file. A takes b5, then a takes, and then he goes b4, sure enough, making use of that move, bishop c2, played on maybe 1 to 2 moves prior. Now here black, he does trade on b4, c takes b4, then c takes b4. Now both the a files and the c files are opening up, and that means it will be a lot harder for black to get the initiative going on the king side. All right, now black, queen to e7 is the move, and then here, Gukesh, a very interesting choice, rook to a5, flying up with the rook, pressuring b5. Maybe Gukesh is intending perhaps queen to a1, and so on, piling up pressure on the open a file. Now here, black should be thinking about getting some sort of active play on the king side or in the center. Maybe bishop b6 or h5 are the strongest moves here, but instead, he does go bishop d7, further bolstering his pawn on b5. Now at first glance, this move looks okay by Leon Mendoca. However, the problem with this move, overall, it's a little bit slow, and white, again, will be pressing in this middle game. And here, Gukesh, he fully capitalizes on the moment, and he goes d4, finally breaking in the center. I mean, everything is just slowly but surely coming together for Gukesh so far in this game. Now here, Leo Mendoca, bishop c6, pressuring e4. Now, very importantly, black has the bishop and the knight pressuring e4 in this position, but Gukesh says, you know what, we're going to ignore that for now, and we're just going to go queen to a1, a good multi-purpose move. The point being, number one, you are threatening rook to a7, putting pressure on the 7th rank and chasing back that queen. Beyond that, of course, white has threats based on d takes e5, and then if d takes, taking with the knight, as that knight would be defended sufficiently by the queen and the bishop. So overall, the pawn on e4 is hanging, but white has a lot of threats of his own, including rook to a7 and d takes e5 as well. Now here, black goes rook f to e8, further bolstering that pawn on e5, a solid choice. And here it turns out white should think about trading on e5. D takes e5 is the correct decision here, trying to open up the center. That is the right idea. But instead, here, Gukesh on move 24, he goes bishop b3. What is the idea behind this move? I mean, Gukesh applying no pressure to the pawn on e5 and giving up the pawn on e4 in the process, again, as that pawn is simply hanging now. Black can literally take it with the bishop or the knight, whatever he wants. But here, black, for some reason, he doesn't take that pawn on e4. Right here, bishop takes e4 is the strongest move. That would be the easy way for black to maintain equality in this game, but instead, rook to a8 chosen, trying to challenge white's dominance of the open a file. Of course, the rook on a8 is defended twice by the bishop and the rook, therefore white is not winning material, but again, this is not the right way forward, and here white just goes knight d2, retreating his knight, further bolstering the pawn on e5, and now very importantly, the f-file is opening up for the rook on f1. White suddenly has a lot of pressure on that pawn on f7. For example, if black goes knight takes e4, that would be a massive mistake, as then rook takes f7 effectively wins the queen on the spot. Therefore, black does go rook to f8, trying to defend, and now Gukesh, once again, bishop c2. We've seen him go back and forth with this bishop over and over in this game. Once again, it does defend e4, but the bishop and the knight are defending, and so far, it's starting to look like Gukesh is having a hard time converting his small advantage in this middle game. He's trying to shark around for an opening, but Gukesh cannot find the opening he needs yet. And here, Leon Mendoca, he goes knight to h5, a very active move, threatening the bishop on g3, maybe threatening knight f4 in certain lines if that pawn on e3 ever does move. Now we have bishop e1, white retreating the bishop, then knight f6, basically a draw offer. Here, if Gukesh wants a draw, he would go bishop g3, knight h5, bishop e1, knight f6, and so on. Both sides would repeat. That would be very good for black. Black is, significantly lower rated than Gukesh in this game. So, of course, Gukesh, he's going to fight on, and he fights on with the move rook to f5. Now, this move is a little bit dubious. You are pressuring e5, but there were stronger alternatives. Now, here black trades on a5. Rook takes a5, showing one of the weaknesses of this move, rook to f5. The rook no longer on the first rank, where it doesn't have access to the a1 square. So, B takes a5, chosen in the game, and now here black, what should he be doing? Well, very importantly, white has that pass pawn on the a file. Black does need to defend that as the game progresses, and for that reason, moving the pieces over to the queen side makes a lot of sense. For example, the computer likes queen c7, b7, a7, or even rook to c8 in this position, but instead rook to e8 chosen in the game, and from here, the rook does very little to defend the pawn on a5, and it also doesn't do anything to defend the pawn on f7. So overall, rook e8, kind of a dubious move in this position. All right, now d5 is the move, gaining space in the center. Bishop d7 chosen by Leon Mendoca. Then rook to f2. Gukesh retreating his rook. Of course, it was under attack by the bishop. Now we have bishop c8, retreating the bishop. Again, a passive move, and Gukesh finally finds a way to regroup his pieces and apply a little more pressure. He goes knight to f1, a very good move. Now, both the bishop defending a5 and the knight has access to g3 and f5, where it would be very, very strong. So a good regrouping of that knight. Now we have queen to a7. Leon Mendoca sliding over with the queen. Then queen to a3. Gukesh defending that pawn on e3 that was being attacked by the black queen. And now here, Leon Mendoca makes yet another mistake in this very complicated middle game. It turns out here, the strongest move, it's kind of an obvious one, is just knight g4, piling up pressure on both the rook and the pawn on e3. Instead, in the game, rook d8 chosen, I guess trying to defend the pawn on d6, but again, this move is very, very passive, and here, Gukesh, he turns up the heat. Bishop b4, applying more pressure on that pawn on d6. How is black going to defend? He goes knight to e8, and technically, for now, yes, he is defending. Both the rook and the knight on e8 are defending the pawn on d6. However, again, white is slowly but surely piling up the pressure. All right, knight g3. That knight is threatening to infiltrate on the f5 square. Now black goes knight to e7, again trying to defend. But look at this. I mean, both the knights very, very defensively placed here on e7 and e8. The rook defends d6 and so on. But this setup for black just cannot work in the long run. His pieces are just way too passive. All right, now white, bishop d1, perhaps intending, bishop h5 ideas, piling up pressure again on that weak pawn on f7. Now black, knight g8, he retreats his knight, then bishop b2, queen to b7. The queen now defends that pawn on b5. Gukesh again lining up more and more threats. Now bishop d3, centralizing the bishop. Knight g to f6 jumping back with the knight, and now rook to c2, threatening potentially an infiltration with the rook on c6. Now here, black does go bishop d7, trying to defend, but again, as discussed, Leon Mendoca just playing way too passive in this middle game so far. Instead, he really had to get some sort of counterplay going on the king side, perhaps with the move h5 or something similar. That is really the only way forward for black here in this position. Instead, bishop d7 chosen in the game, and the problem with this move, yes, it does defend b5, however, it gives up the pawn on d6 as it is now undefended, and here white just goes bishop takes d6, flying in with the bishop. Again, the rook is being blocked from defending d6. White wins a pawn for free, and from here, Gukesh, he just takes over in this middle game. Now, knight takes d6, then queen takes d6, flying in with the queen to a7, pressuring e3, but Gukesh has it completely under control. He ignores the pawn and goes queen takes e5, winning the free pawn on e5. Now black takes on e3, queen takes e3 is the move, hitting the king with check, but now Gukesh, the final move of the game, simply rook to f2, sliding over with the rook, threatening the knight on f6, and here, there is nothing black can do to defend that knight on f6. I mean, the only move that he actually could do, perhaps, is queen to f6, but of course, that loses the queen on the spot. Therefore, here, black, he simply resigns on the spot to Gukesh D in round number 9 of the 2025 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. Wow, what a game by Gukesh D, the current reigning world champion of chess. All right, Chess YouTube, go and comment down below what you thought of this game between the two Indian grandmasters. I mean, it seems like every day there's some other Indian grandmaster I haven't heard about who's just flying up in the ratings. I'll have to add Leon Mendoca to my list of Indian grandmasters to watch out for. I mean, Pragnanda is still my favorite Indian grandmaster, but it seems like every day there are just more and more of these guys coming up. So again, comment down below what you think of all of these just killer Indian grandmasters flying up in the ratings. And if you want to see more Gukesh action, check out this video right here where I cover yet another one of his latest games from the 2025 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. And I'll see you in the next video.